Hello, everyone. Tonight we're going to do something a little different. You find yourself in a quiet wooden house, the scent of incense still lingering in the air. Light filters through paper walls. Outside, the fine rain touches the ground with a gentleness that feels almost deliberate. On a low table rests a small envelope made of rice paper, so light it could float on a sigh. Inside it, a love letter written by a samurai. And yes, you prob so before you get comfortable. Take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to know, where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Tell me in the comments. Now dim the lights, you're on your knees, the floor covered in straw mats. Your fingers glide over the delicate surface of a sheet of rice paper, hand-picked from a stationery shop that only opens before sunrise. Why? Because the breeze is better for drying the paper, of course. Every detail matters. The paper itself is already part of the letter. It's handmade, from beaten mulberry fibers, filtered and sun-dried. It has a smooth, almost silky texture. And when you hold it up to the light, you see tiny specks, not imperfections, but marks of authenticity. The letter is still blank, but not for long. Even before you write a word, there's the perfume ritual. You light a small incense stick, usually sandalwood or dried plum blossom. You hold the paper above the smoke for a few seconds. Nothing excessive, just enough so that when the letter is opened, the scent evokes something intimate. Something of you. It's like sending a piece of your presence. By the way, did you know that samurai were obsessed with scents? They trained their senses in games called Kodo, where they had to identify fragrances while blindfolded. A refined pastime amid occasional decapitations. The contrast is fascinating. You pick up the brush. Yes, a brush. Ink made from charcoal and water. The first drop on the page always comes out a bit shaky, but gradually the writing flows. You don't start with a hi or a hope you're well. None of that. Tradition says to begin with a line of poetry, something vague but loaded with meaning, like autumn leaves dance, but none touch the deep lake. Translation: I thought of you last night. Writing a love letter in that time wasn't just about what you wanted to say. It was about how you wanted to be remembered. Your calligraphy, how you hold the brush, the weight of your hand, it all reveals your emotional state. If the stroke slips or shakes too much, someone might think you're sad, anxious, or feverish. Interestingly, historians still debate whether these letters truly expressed sincere feelings or if many were obligatory social exercises. After all, sending letters was part of courtly ritual, like attending a dinner when all you wanted was to watch the rain fall. But in this case, you write because you want to, because you miss her, because amid the chaos of training, patrols, and internal politics, she still crosses your mind when you see a leaf fall. While the ink dries, you watch it. It's almost therapeutic. The paper absorbs the words slowly. You can't erase. If you make a mistake, you have to start all over, which makes each sentence an almost final decision. And you thought sending a long text message was complicated. The letter is ready, but you don't sign it with your name. That would be considered far too bold. You use a symbol, a personal seal, or an ambiguous ideogram, something that says, "It's me," without actually saying, "It's me." It's a delicate dance between revealing and hiding. Before folding it, you read it one last time, silently. There's something about the way the brush captured your feeling that modern words might never achieve. That curve in the character. For Kay's wind came out perfect, a small emotional victory. You fold the paper carefully without a seal. Folding well is an art. The letter must open like a flower, in layers, revealing the message as if it were a secret told in whispers. A wax seal would. Now the letter is ready to be delivered. But that is another story. For now you simply store it inside a small wooden case, hand-carved, lined with fabric. and leave it under the tatami, near your bed, like a dream that hasn't been sent yet. You wake up early, still with the memory of that letter resting beneath the tatami. But now the day begins, and you need to look like a samurai. Your hair is tied back with almost mathematical precision, your garments folded with a rigor that would make any modern fashion designer weep with joy, and your sword is exactly where it should be, on your left side, symbolizing readiness. But ironically, the most important item today isn't made of steel. It's the brush, yes, the writing brush. You place it in a cylindrical case, along with a block of solid ink and an extra sheet of rice paper, just in case. Doesn't sound very epic, right? But in feudal Japan, especially during the Edo period, calligraphy was as crucial as knowing where to strike an enemy. Practically speaking, your writing defined whether you were a civilized warrior or just a brute with an expensive sword. You sit in the inner garden, surrounded by bamboo and the distant sound of a lone crow. And then you begin to practice. Not the sword, the stroke, the curve, the rhythm of ink on paper, because you see, writing to someone, especially a love letter, wasn't something you improvised between a patrol shift and a bowl of rice. It was a silent performance. Your posture had to be perfect. Back straight, feet grounded, and your elbow floating as if held up by an invisible string. A slight tremor, that was it. The handwriting would be shaky, and the person receiving it might think you were hesitant, or sick, or drunk, or all three. Worse, they might think you didn't care enough to try writing properly. Funny to think that today, most of us can't hold a pen for more than 5 minutes without complaining. But back then, calligraphy was status, a reflection of your mind, your soul, and yes, your potential as a romantic partner. He has a firm sword strike and a charming stroke in hiragana, an irresistible combo. You remember that back then, it was common to train with a master just to improve your calligraphy, not sword movements, but those of the wrist, the ink, the silence. Historians still debate whether the Bushido code of honor truly included the obligation to write well, or if it was more of a social expectation among the higher classes. But the truth is, if you wanted to be taken seriously by someone from the aristocracy, especially a court lady, your kanji had to sing. Speaking of court women, it was common for them to reply with equal sophistication, meaning the game of seduction played out more in the subtleties of handwriting than in direct words. Female script was generally more rounded, softer. Male script, firm but elegant. Sometimes the styles blended, a subtle clue of affection or rebellion. Now imagine this. You receive a letter from the one you love, and her handwriting subtly imitates yours. It's as if she danced with your stroke, line by line. That was the peak of intimacy. No emojis, no winking faces, just the weight of the brush. As you train, a butterfly lands on the edge of the pergola. It stays there for a moment still, just like you. Because somehow it seems to be part of this ritual too, as if nature were always watching, always judging, gently but with discernment. Your mentor, who probably never showed affection in life, used to say, "A good letter is worth more than 10 well-sharpened swords." You used to think it was just poetry, but now you understand. By the way, remember the writing case. Some were true works of art, lacquered with tiny paintings of cherry blossoms or mountain landscapes. Inside, besides the brush and ink, there was space for a small mirror, not out of vanity, but to check if your face looked calm. Because to transmit serenity in your brushstroke, you first had to have it on your face. A light joke for you. A samurai walks into a stationery shop and says, "I want the most romantic paper you have." The clerk hands him a blank sheet, because, of course, romance is in what has yet to be written. Okay. Not every samurai was a poet, but you're ready now. Today's practice ends with one final word on the paper, kokoro, heart, a simple but powerful symbol. You take a deep breath and look at your own writing, steady, flowing, with a slight touch of emotion in the final curve. It's almost as if your heart held the brush for a moment. The letter you wrote last night is still there, hidden, but now perhaps you consider writing another, or simply rewriting that one with a steadier stroke. Because love, for a samurai, begins with a blank sheet and the courage to fill it slowly. You already have the letter, you already have the calligraphy, but now comes one of the most delicate parts. Where exactly are you going to keep it? Because you see, love, back then, wasn't an act worn on the sleeve. Especially if you were a samurai. Showing affection in public, that could be seen as weakness. So hiding what you wrote was almost as important as writing it well. And we're not talking about stuffing the letter in the back of a drawer. No, you needed ingenuity. Samurai, especially during the Edo period, had creative, and sometimes even poetic, methods for hiding love letters. One of the most common was inside the folds of the kimono, in the so-called sode, the wide sleeves. Yes, those sleeves that seem useless for everything except accidentally catching fire near a lantern. But in reality, they served as secret pockets. A carefully folded letter could stay there for days, with the scent of incense soaking into the paper. And here comes a curious detail. The scent wasn't accidental. Many samurai, and their correspondents too, would perfume their letters using small incense holders built into cabinets. The fragrance wasn't just vanity, it was a form of recognition. You smelled the letter before opening it, and already knew who it was from. Letters smelled like people. Now imagine you're returning from patrol, tired, your legs ache, and inside your sleeve, the gentle touch of paper against your arm reminds you of something lighter than duty. Someone cares about you. It's almost like carrying a warm secret within the rigid formality of your life. Sometimes letters were hidden in everyday objects. Fans, for example. You open one, and between the wooden ribs, there's a tiny note, almost invisible. Other times, they were placed inside the brush case, something no one dared to open without permission. After all, that case was as personal as a sword. And no one, I repeat, no one, touched another samurai's sword. Historians still debate whether there truly was a kind of secret code shared among samurai lovers, something like hidden symbols embedded within the calligraphic strokes. Some suggest there were indeed subtle patterns, a longer stroke, a displaced dot, tiny clues that gave the letter a second meaning. But of course none of these codes have survived intact to this day, which only adds to the mystery. And speaking of mystery, some samurai hid their letters in secret compartments within their armor, especially near the chest, between layers of lacquer and leather. A letter there could even be protected from arrows. Imagine the level of poetry in that. A heart protected not only by armor, but by words. Of course, all this didn't prevent accidents. There's a story, part comedy, part tragedy, of a samurai who went to sleep with his beloved's letter, hidden inside his wooden pillow called a takamakura. During the night he rolled over, the paper slipped, and the next morning his superior found the letter, and was not exactly moved by the tenderness of the calligraphy. The result? 3 weeks patrolling a village full of rice paddies, a fitting punishment for sleeping with his heart exposed. But back to you, you don't want to take that risk. So today, as the sun begins to sink on the horizon and the air carries that scent of warm wood, you carefully choose the place where your letter will spend the night. A not-so-obvious hiding spot, the false bottom of a tea box. Yes, tea was part of the samurai routine too, but that's a story for another night. For now, the important thing is that the round little box, seemingly plain, has a base that subtly rotates, and there, in a space just wide enough for a folded piece of paper, the letter slides in and vanishes. You hear footsteps in the wooden corridor. Probably your younger brother, who loves showing up with questions like, "Did you clean your sword today?" Or, "Bet you forgot tomorrow's archery practice?" But you're not worried, because no one would ever think to look for a love letter in a tea container. And because you're starting to enjoy this game of hiding clues, as if the act of loving itself were a covert emotional operation. In fact, among samurai, hiding a letter so carefully was a clear sign of commitment. As important as gifting a ceremonial dagger. After all, those who guard words, guard promises, but you're not quite done. Before closing the box, you take a small plum blossom branch, a symbol of perseverance in winter, and place it alongside the letter, just so that if one day the letter is found, the gesture is complete. And the most beautiful part, you know she may never read that letter, but the very act of writing it, hiding it, and preserving it already makes you someone different, someone who feels, and who, discreetly, chooses not to let that feeling be lost in the chaos of the world outside. You wake up to the soft sound of bamboo stalks brushing against each other. The morning wind slips through the cracks of the house, and everything is in its proper place, including the letter, still hidden inside the tea box, protected from time, from prying eyes, and more importantly, from yourself rereading it and changing your mind. Because as you well know, it's always tempting to erase what you wrote in the heat of the moment. But today, something changes. You decide to deliver it, yes. No more hiding spots or secret codes. Today, you will deliver the letter. And that completely changes the tone of your day. Because now, it's no longer just about writing well or hiding with style. Now you must navigate a minefield of social rules, hierarchies, and the very real possibility of being ridiculed by your peers who think love is for weak poets. And you're a warrior, remember? But you're also human and curious. So you start getting dressed with more care than usual. The obi, that sash that holds the kimono, is perfectly aligned. Your hair is tied back, not a strand out of place. Even your sword is more polished than necessary for an ordinary morning. And the letter? Folded, tucked beneath the inner lining of your hakama, practically against your skin. In fact, this was a common practice, using one's own body as a vault for feelings. There are accounts of samurai sewing small inner pouches into their underclothes, as if affection truly had to be worn beneath layers of discipline and stoicism. But you choose a simpler method, one that allows quick access should the right moment arrive. And that's when the hard part begins, because the delivery, like everything in this world, follows etiquette. You can't just walk up to the person, shove the letter into their hand and run away, at least not if you want to preserve your reputation. So methods varied. Some bolder samurai enlisted the help of a nakodo, a kind of professional matchmaker or go-between. Others trusted loyal servants to deliver the letter along with a symbolic gift, like a slice of sweet or a small origami crane. Historians still debate whether there was a best time to deliver such letters. Some say twilight was most common, coinciding with the moment the day slows down and spirits grow more introspective. Others argue that dawn was more appropriate, symbolizing a new beginning. But you don't have a nakodo, nor do you want to wait until sunset, so your choice is braver. You'll deliver it personally during the break in sword training. Because if there's one time when tensions drop, it's when everyone is too tired to gossip. You cross the packed sand, courtyard, feeling curious glances, not because they know what's about to happen, but because any break from routine draws attention. You approach slowly. Words are stuck in your throat, and you silently thank yourself for having written everything down, because speaking impossible right now. When you see her, she's sitting under the shade of a cherry blossom tree, carefully wiping the hilt of her sword. A scene that would be intimidating if not for the way she softly whistles. A melody you heard the other day but still don't know from where. You stop at a respectful distance, bow slightly, and greet her with a soft "Ohayo gozaimasu." She looks up, and in that second, You feel every word of the letter vibrate in your chest, as if the ink were still wet. You pull out the letter, 2 folds, thick paper, lightly perfumed. You extend it with both hands, like an offering. She says nothing. She simply accepts it and puts it away without reading. Yes, she keeps it. The silence that follows is disconcerting, but you can't ask for more than that. Because in the samurai world, the simple act of accepting a letter already says a lot. Rejection? It would be polite, yes, but also final. Keeping it, on the other hand, opens invisible doors. It's not a yes, but it's not a no either. And the strangest thing of all, you feel lighter, because even warriors need from time to let go of something they've carried close to the chest. And now, the paper is in someone else's hands. Literally. You return to the courtyard, resume your training. Each strike now feels looser, as if the tension left along with the letter. And in a way, it did. By the end of the day, when the sky glows with shades of pink and amber, you hear a sound from the dojo's message box. A small, dry tap. You don't run, but you go. And there it is. A small origami, a blue crane, made from the same paper as the letter you delivered earlier. No words. Just form. But as with everything in a samurai's life, the gesture speaks louder than the text. You place the crane inside your brush case, a special place, almost as special as that little spot on your chest where your letter slept for so many nights. What if someone finds your letter? It's a rainy afternoon, the kind that even makes swords feel heavier. You walk back to your room, trying not to slip on the wet wooden steps of the corridor. Inside, the oil lanterns flicker, casting shadows that dance on the walls like they're rehearsing a play about secrets and tension. And then paranoia hits. The letter, that other one, the one you didn't have the courage to deliver, the unfinished version kept inside your ink case. You don't remember exactly what you wrote, but you remember the raw emotion, the dramatic overstatements, and how you ended the last line with a smear of hesitation. You search the case. Nothing. You take a deep breath, trying to recall. Did you throw it away? Burn it? No, you'd never burn it. Ink was far too expensive to waste. And now you're sitting there, heart-pounding, doing the math. What if someone found it? What if someone read it? A samurai's life may be governed by honor, code, and silence, but love is a minefield no military manual ever truly prepares you for. You sit down and try to think like a strategist, because you see, the fear of your letter being found isn't just about shame. It's about reputation, about alliances, about possible arranged marriages that could unravel if someone found out you had feelings. The horror. In fact, there are records of love letters being used as political weapons. Yes, in certain clans, intercepted letters were delivered to superiors as proof of distraction, disloyalty, or simply inappropriate conduct. You can imagine how quickly gossip traveled among servants and soldiers. It was like an oral social network where every crease in the paper carried a rumor. Historians still debate whether these letters truly resulted in harsh punishments or if they were mostly used as leverage for silent blackmail. Some say a young samurai from the Satsuma domain lost his position over a letter containing a poem that rhymed moon with silken handkerchief. Reasonable? No, but perhaps too poetic. You do what any reasonably anxious warrior would. You search every place where you might have left the forgotten letter. Under the tatami, in the clothing chest, behind the folding screen where you usually practice with your wooden sword. Nothing. The paranoia builds, and then you remember the last time you cleaned the temple, you brought several notes along to review later. And maybe, just maybe, you left something there. The temple is sacred, yes, but also full of curious eyes, young monks, apprentices passing through, and of course the master's cat, who loves knocking things over. You walk to the temple. The rain has turned to drizzle. Your feet make a soft, squishing sound in the mud. Each step is accompanied by the memory of a line you may have written. Your eyes wound me more than any blade. Or was it something worse? In the temple, the scent of incense masks the smell of damp wood. Candles are still lit and silence reigns, except for a distant scratching sound. The cat, of course. You approach the side altar where you used to store papers. A box, you open it. There it is, the letter, still folded with your hesitant handwriting, the kind written in the dark with haste and emotion. And surprise, someone has written something in the lower corner of the page, a note, simply, "Good thing you didn't deliver this." You freeze, you recognize the handwriting. It's your writing master, that 70-year-old man who speaks little, and always says feelings are good, but they need to be fermented. You feel a mix of shame and relief, because if he's the one who found it, then your reputation is safe, more or less. And yes, he read it, but at least he didn't spread it around. You hide the letter back in the case, and this time you burn it slowly, every piece turning to ash, blending with the incense, and as the smoke rises, you feel a certain weight lift from your shoulders. One less letter to worry about. A memory that now lives only with you, and perhaps with that old man who, thankfully, doesn't know how to weaponize poetry. Back in your room, you reorganize your hiding spots. The current letter, the one that was accepted, now lies somewhere else, safer. And the future ones? Well, you begin to consider a code system. Something like fold into a triangle if it's safe, square if it's urgent, lotus flower if it's just a confession. Yes, it'll be work. But it's better than waking up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, imagining your poem being read out loud in the main courtyard as a joke. Because you see, in a time when everything was governed by honor, a letter out of place was more dangerous than a poorly fought duel. You blow out the lantern, lie down, and whisper to yourself like a mantra, "Next time, 3 edits before I sign." Calligraphy is a secret code. You hold the brush with the tips of your fingers, as if touching a musical note too fragile to be heard. It's early morning and sunlight filters through the wooden slats, as if it too is trying to read what you're writing. But what you're writing isn't exactly meant to be read, at least not by just anyone. In this moment, calligraphy is not just aesthetic, it's camouflage. You already know that words can get you in trouble, so you begin to think like a true romantic spy. And guess what? Many samurai did exactly that. Yes, there was a way to write love letters that, to untrained eyes, looked like harmless excerpts from poetry manuals, tea requests, or even administrative reports. It all depended on the kind of stroke you used, the angle of the key stem, the way that Sue curled like a leaf in the wind. A touch, a slant, a flourish, and suddenly the letter said something else entirely. You scribble an example. "The plum trees are blooming early this year." Seems like an innocent botanical observation, right? But if you extend the final stroke of the ideogram for bloom, and slightly tilt the syllable for early, a careful and trained reader would understand. My feelings arrived before they were allowed. Subtle, beautiful, and totally deniable if someone confronts you. Historians still debate whether these codes were systematic or improvised, but preserved calligraphies suggest that certain patterns did repeat. Even combinations of ink and paper could signal different intentions. Thinner ink, a timid flirtation, bold dry strokes, a direct confession, recycled paper from official documents, love calculated with risk. And don't think this was only for the elite. In samurai academies, among lessons on etiquette and battle strategy, calligraphy was taken seriously. Writing poorly was almost an insult to the paper, and writing well, with intention, with disguised emotion, was like mastering a martial art of the heart. You remember your first attempt at camouflage. The letter was about tea preparation, but the way you drew the ideogram for hot water was so ornate that had the recipient understood, she would have blushed to her ears. She didn't understand, or pretended not to. But she replied with, "A letter about the temperature of the breeze, ambiguous enough to keep the game alive." Yes, it was a game, but a dangerous one. Because calligraphy with secrets wasn't like texting in a group chat. It meant betting your entire reputation on every stroke of the brush. And you remember the famous case, don't you? A samurai from the north, renowned for his flawless calligraphy, who was accused of treason because his innocent letters to the wife of a rival daimyo had strokes too floral. The scandal was hushed, but the letters were copied and used as examples of what not to do, the incriminating detail, the tale on the ideogram for rain, which he wrote as a spiral when it should have been a hook. A hook, dear listener, a hook can end your career. You sigh. Maybe it's time to create your own legend, a personal code book where every curve and flick has a purpose, a symbol for "I'll wait for you tonight," another for "burn this letter after reading," and of course, one for "this is just a poem about flowers, I swear." You wet the brush and try writing again, this time with a subtler touch. Less hopeless romantic, more emotionally stable civil servant. The goal is to go unnoticed, to be invisibly in love. Because let's face it, there's a comforting beauty in saying everything without saying anything. In trusting that the reader will feel the space between the words, like the pause between two drum beats, like the silence before the rain. You seal the note with wax, not with your family crest, with a neutral stamp from a tea shop that no longer exists. Just one more layer of protection, and when someone intercepts it, if they do, they'll only see a strange request about bamboo leaves and the right time to harvest them. Nothing more. Except that, between the lines, anyone who knows how to read will understand. Do you still think of me? The folding ritual as emotional camouflage. You hold the paper with both hands. The contents are already written. Now comes the critical part, the fold. It's not just a matter of logistics, of making the paper fit in an envelope. It's a silent art, a ritual, a disguise. Yes, folding letters wasn't random. It was almost as expressive as the text inside. Depending on how you folded it, a letter could look like a shopping list, a military document, or, with luck, just an old piece of trash no one would bother to read. At this moment, you're using the oyster fold. That's what romantic calligraphers called a style where the letter folds over itself in a way that hides the center, like a shell, protecting a pearl. It sounds dramatic, but if the content is a love confession, better that no one sees it shine. Historians still debate whether these folds were formally taught or passed secretly between friends and lovers. Some say each dojo taught a different style. Others that they were practices inherited from imperial courts and later adopted by samurai for less ceremonial purposes. You fold the paper precisely, once, then in half, then in thirds, then a little corner tucked inward. It looks like a blooming flower, but to anyone watching, it'd seem like just a strange filing method. The beauty lies in this. It appears unimportant, forgettable, but it isn't. Remember that samurai who invented the bean fold? A peculiar method for hiding tiny erotic poems inside letters about agriculture. It was subtle. In the middle of a letter, between lines on fertilizer and harvests, there'd be a small folded square sealed with a dry bean. Whoever opened it and found that knew it contained more than planting advice. You consider using something like that, but today might call for something more sober. After all, you took enough risks last week with the perfumed letter. That nearly went wrong when your apprentice dropped it in the well. And yes, scent was another signal. Letters were folded, and before sealing, a petal was placed inside. chamomile for longing, yuzu for hope, clove for I can't wait any longer. But all of that depended on the right fold, the correct space so the petal wouldn't be crushed. And give away the contents. Today, your letter is only text, but the fold still carries weight. You choose to leave one flap slightly raised, a subtle sign meaning reply if you wish. And do you know why? Because even within this entire system of visual and gestural coding, samurai valued the possibility of silence. The letter isn't just what it says, it's what it allows. And there's one last layer, the side of the fold facing outward. Depending on what part is exposed, the receiver could guess the tone of the message before even opening it. You place a neutral ideogram in sight, light rain, just enough to say not urgent but also worth reading. Of course, there were risks. A wrong fold could mean something else entirely. They say a warrior was once banished for folding a love letter like a military decree. The result, the girl's father thought it was an elopement order. She showed up with her bags packed. A small tragedy, folded. You finish. Run your fingers along the edge, smoothing it gently. And in that gesture, repeated thousands of times by thousands of hands over the centuries, you connect to all of them. The silent lovers, the desperate calligraphers, the warriors with trembling hands. Well-folded letter doesn't just protect the paper, it protects you. And then comes the doubt. Will the other person understand? Will they notice the raised flap, the chosen ideogram, the way you sealed the bottom with rice instead of traditional glue? You hope so. Because deep down, folding is a request, an invitation, a paper whisper saying, look closely, I can't speak loudly. You slip the letter into your kimono sleeve, the traditional place where it will be safe but close, just like the words you dare not speak aloud. The day is ending. Outside, the sound of cicadas blends with the soft beat of a distant drum. And you walk slowly, with a quiet fold in your heart. The most unlikely and secure hiding places. You stop in front of the sliding cabinet, the one that creaks just a little on the left side. It's here where you keep what must not be seen, though it wasn't always this way. If there's one thing samurai were good at, it was hiding messages in places even a cat would overlook. It begins like this. The letter is folded, sealed, maybe even scented, and now you're not just going to leave it on the tea table, hoping no curious soul opens it. So, yes, it's time to think like a samurai. And samurai didn't just hide letters, they camouflaged possibilities. The classic hiding spot was inside the katana's scabbard, and no, not deep inside the blade like in movies. It was more elaborate. A carefully carved slit on the inner side of the scabbard, near the guard, where a small piece of paper could be rolled and tucked without damaging the interior. You had to draw the blade at just the right angle, or the note would fall, or worse, be lost to time. Historians still debate whether this trick started with war messages or romantic confessions, or both. After all, love and war have always gone hand in hand, especially when in-laws have access to spears, but maybe you're not carrying your katana today, so you need more flexible options. And here comes creativity. Have you ever considered hiding a letter inside a rice cracker? Apparently dry on the outside, but stuffed with a secret written on fine mulberry paper, folded like a petal. Sure, there's the risk of someone hungry eating your correspondence, but they say it only happened 3 times, or 7. The records are contradictory, which only makes the story more delicious. Another unlikely hiding spot, inside the sole of a zori, the traditional sandal. Some models had removable insoles, and a tiny compartment could hold up to 3 letters tightly rolled. The only challenge was walking naturally, without looking like you were stepping on a grumpy frog. You remember an old friend who used to hide letters inside the handle of his fan. It was clever but risky. One strong breeze, and there went the secret flying through the skies. Still, it was a charming choice, especially when the message was meant to be read in a garden at dusk, between slow sips of green tea. And there's the classic, within the folds of the obi, the sash of the kimono. It seemed obvious, which is exactly why no one ever dared to look there. It was the samurai equivalent of hiding your phone in your sock. A bulkier letter could be stored inside a prayer book, but this required coordination. The recipient had to know which chapter to open. You remember a famous story about two lovers who used the positions of the stars as a code to match pages. A bit exaggerated, perhaps, but undeniably poetic. The boldest hiding place you've ever seen. A letter concealed inside a slice of dried daikon radish. Yes, the vegetable, cut with surgical precision, stuffed and stitched back together, with rice thread before being dehydrated again. It was a method used by messengers traveling between villages. If caught, they simply ate the evidence. Literally, today, your letter isn't bulky. You choose the obi, firm, discreet, already tested. Carefully, you slide the letter between the fabric layers, adjusting it so it doesn't create a visible bulge. You move, test it. Nothing shifts, nothing gives it away. Perfect. As you finish, you remember that time the hiding place was the ceiling fan, or rather, the ancestral Japanese version of it, a bamboo spinning structure used to chase away mosquitoes. No one thought to look there. After all, who would hide a letter in something that moves? You smile at the memory, because that was the whole game. Think like no one else would. Act as though there's nothing to hide. And yet, hide everything. Now, with the letter secured, you adjust your kimono, take a deep breath, and walk to the door. Outside, the world goes on. But inside the fabric wrapped around your waist, a silent message pulses. And the best part? Only those who know where to look will understand that you carry more than just footsteps. You carry words with the weight of silence. When rain became the accomplice of secret meetings, you open the window just a little. Outside, the sky is sulking, and the first drops begin to darken the packed earth ground. Perfect. Because if there's one thing the samurai knew how to use, well, it was the rain. Not by chance, many meetings and deliveries of letters took place under the rhythmic sound of falling water. Rain meant more than a melancholic backdrop. It was disguise, excuse, and sound curtain all at once. You walk carefully, your steps muffled by the wet wooden floorboards. The letter stays well guarded in your obi. And you know, today, no one will suspect your walk to the potter's house. After all, with this weather, of course you're going to fetch a new bowl, or tea, or maybe just to find shelter. Who could judge? Historians still debate how much samurai timed their meetings with local weather forecasts. Some claim there were specific calendars for days suited to discreet confessions. Others believe rain was a spontaneous gift, a kind of atmospheric blessing. Either way, the fact remains. Many records speak of letters exchanged during light. Rain, carried in the damp sleeves of dark kimonos, with alert eyes and pounding hearts. Because the rain did more than hide footprints. It muffled sighs. Remember that letter that survived 7 summers inside a roof tile? It was written on a rainy afternoon. The sender, a shy samurai, didn't have the courage to deliver it. He left it beneath the eaves, thinking time would take it. But the rain protected it, glued the letter to the clay and kept it hidden until a renovation nearly a century later revealed it. The paper was faded, but the intent remained intact. You walk calmly, as if carrying nothing more than your own silence. The rain sprinkles your face and you remember. It also helped explain tearful eyes. No one would ask whether it was rain or emotion. And if needed, you could pretend to stumble, fall, get your kimono wet, and hand over the letter as a plea for help. Of course, there were risks. Water could erase ink. That's why some letters were written with mineral-based pigments, more resistant. or with light brushstrokes, so that the humidity only blurred them gently, enough to beautify, not destroy. You turn a corner and recall the famous story of the samurai who wrote letters on rice paper and placed them inside lotus leaves. During heavier rains, the leaves would float downstream until they reached the garden of his beloved. It was poetic, yes, but also rather frustrating, since not all the leaves made it. Some ended up in the neighbor's rice field, who accidentally became a marriage counselor. The best part of rain was the window of time it created without watchful eyes. Guards relaxed, servants hid, and the steady sound of water masked even hasty footsteps. Many encounters happened in those moments, with letters passed hand to hand beneath a bamboo grove, as if they were simple handkerchiefs. You've done this before. It's not your first rainy meeting, but maybe it's the most important, because this letter, unlike the others, isn't just a poem. It carries a question, and questions weigh more than verses. As you round the final curve, you notice the potter's house has its lantern lit, the agreed-upon signal. You approach, pretend to adjust your sandal, and when she opens the door, you don't say a word. You simply exchange glances. She understands. She always has. You extend your hand, and she doesn't take the letter, only touches your fingers, as if to say, later. And then, with flawless naturalness, she invites you inside. The tea. Bowl is almost ready, she says, as if that's all it is. Just a visit. You smile, grateful for the rain, for the sound that hides your heartbeat, and for the drops that stream down the window like lines of a letter the world is writing right now, just for the two of you. Secret perfumes and papers that speak louder than words. You step into the house, and the gentle warmth of the brazier makes the air feel heavier. The ceramist smiles, and the scent of tea begins to fill the room. But there's something else. A subtle fragrance, sweet, like ripe plum with a hint of sandalwood. And you know, that scent is no accident. In the world of the samurai, fragrance wasn't just decoration. It was language. It was code. It was often the invisible signature of a love letter. In the Japanese court, there was an art called kodo, under the way of incense. And while it might have seemed reserved for nobility and monks, many cultured samurai knew exactly how to prepare a resin so their message would carry personality. You remember a scroll scented with dried orange peel, the sender unknown, that caused a stir during a summer festival. The letter was short, just one line, but the scent lingered in the air for days, and since samurai didn't sign their names directly, many wondered, was it from a secret admirer, or from someone who had already left? Historians still debate whether these perfumes were more often used to identify the sender or to seduce the receiver. Some say it was a sensory provocation, like a touch without ever making contact. Others believe the fragrance was a silent plea. Remember me. The letter you carry today, for example, is lightly scented with camellia oil and the faintest hint of cedar. A personal blend, nothing flashy, but if she opens the letter with care, she'll notice and she'll understand, because you used the same scent last spring, when your footprints were side by side on the stone path behind the temple. The paper also tells its own story. It's not just any paper. It's washi, handmade from mulberry fibers, harvested with care and beaten with patience. The result is a material that is light, strong, and most importantly, enduring. A letter written on washi can survive for centuries, and perhaps deep down you hope this one will too, even if no other eyes ever read it. Some special papers bore nearly invisible watermarks, delicate patterns woven with silk threads into the fibers, only visible under the right light. And in more dangerous times, this is how samurai marked their letters, so that only the true recipient could recognize them. There's also the forgotten practice of writing with a kakemono, no feud, a long, uneven brush that gave the calligraphy a flowing, undulating appearance. It was the visual equivalent of a whisper. You once saw a letter like that, written by a soft-spoken samurai. He never said much, but his words danced across the paper with more emotion than any speech. It was as if each stroke contained hesitation, courage, and a thread of hope. There in the ceramist's home, you watch her prepare the tea. Her movements are slow, almost meditative, and you realize she's waiting for you to make the first move, not with words, but with a gesture. So, without standing, you place the letter on the wooden tray beside the tea bowl, casual, like someone forgetting a handkerchief, or like someone leaving a piece of themselves behind. She doesn't react immediately. She keeps stirring the infusion, but you see her eyes lower for a moment, and you see the faintest lift at the corner of her mouth. She understood more than the words. She noticed the scent, the texture, the weight of the paper, and she knows you thought of all of it, because a love letter among samurai wasn't just about what was written. It was about what was built layer by layer: paper, ink, perfume, silence. You lift the bowl. The steam rises, and for a moment everything feels suspended. The rain still falls, but now it's only background noise. Because here, between the warm wood of the floor and the sweetness of freshly brewed tea, there is something more. Something unspoken, but present, like the perfume she used at the start of summer, still lingering in the corner of the room, tucked inside a fan. You don't need to say a word, neither does she. The letter has already spoken for you. When calligraphy revealed the secrets of the heart, the tea bowl rests between your hands, and you watch the steam dissipate slowly, like mist trailing down a mountain. Across the room, the letter still sits on the tray, unopened, but not ignored. Because in ancient Japan, the time to open a love letter was not the same as opening a sack of rice. There was a ritual, however subtle, and it all began with the calligraphy. You already know, every stroke carries intent. In the world of the samurai, especially the more educated ones, the way something was written said as much as the content itself. The chosen style of calligraphy could indicate the sender's mood, social status, even their level of hope or despair. Today, you chose the Sosho style, the so-called grass script, flowing, almost a tangle of clouds on the paper. It's a style that asks to be interpreted, a subtle invitation for the reader to participate in the message, decoding strokes like one listens for subtext in conversation. Historians still debate whether this style was used for aesthetic convenience or out of a genuine desire to make the message more personal and ambiguous. Some think it was pure charm. Others believe senders wanted to conceal parts of the message even from themselves. In practice, Sosho requires confidence. Every curve is made with the brush suspended, as if the thought were being cast into the air before touching the page. And with that come the flaws, the stumbles, which, ironically, make everything more human. A trembling letter in the recipient's name, for instance, may be more powerful than a perfectly aligned poem. You remember a manuscript kept at the temple in Nara, just 3 sentences, but the last word, written with a stroke that nearly escaped the page, left scholars debating for decades. Was it remembrance? Was it hope? Or was it a name written with hesitation? And we mustn't forget the samurai who practiced calligraphy under the influence of drink. Yes, there were those who considered sake a facilitator of sincerity. Intoxication brought a lightness to the hand, a boldness that only appears when the heart is unburdened. But you chose sobriety. There, seated, you wonder if she's already noticing the invisible marks on the letter. Perhaps not yet. Perhaps she's waiting for the solitude of night, when the world quiets, and only the sound of paper being gently opened remains. You run your fingers along the rim of the tea bowl. The ceramist collects the tray without haste. Her eyes meet yours for the briefest moment. And you know, the calligraphy is already in her mind. She has seen letters like this before. Perhaps she keeps a box. Perhaps she reads and rereads them by the light of an oil lamp, deciphering more than just the words. Remember the samurai who used blue ink mixed with fragments of lapis lazuli? The color wasn't traditional, but he believed it conveyed more emotion. They say his letters smelled of the sea breeze, though he lived deep inland. Legends grow like that, stroke by stroke. You, however, kept the ink dark, nearly black, discreet, but with one detail, a single word in red, her name nestled between the paragraphs. Subtle, not meant to shock, just to mark. That choice was not accidental. The use of color in characters was a bold gesture, but acceptable on certain occasions, especially the more intimate ones. Red suggested more than passion. It meant intensity, urgency, or perhaps just concentrated tenderness. You stand. The empty bowl returns to the tray. The letter remains there, but now something has changed. She picks it up, gently, without looking directly, but with careful hands, as if lifting a petal. You ask nothing, because you know the answer will come. Maybe tomorrow, maybe in another letter, or in a simple gesture, like a new perfume in the handkerchief she will accidentally leave behind. Calligraphy is slow, but what it builds remains, like the stones of a Zen garden, which say nothing, yet suggest everything. The hiding place of feelings, folds, knots, and silences. The letter is written, the scent applied, the calligraphy carefully drawn, but something is still missing. You can't simply hand over the paper like this, bare and unguarded. In the world of the samurai, the way a letter was folded could be just as meaningful as its contents. You remember the time a fellow samurai spent hours folding a single sheet? Not out of hesitation, but because there was a code in it. A kind of silent choreography, understood only by those who knew what to look for. And today, it's your turn to fold, slowly, each crease creating a rhythm, an intimate tempo. You follow the traditional technique known as tatogami, a discreet art of wrapping messages in layers of paper, protected not only from dust, but from curious eyes. Because yes, a letter could be read by an unsuspecting messenger, or by a nosy rival, but when folded well, it clearly said, "This is not for you." There are records of samurai who invented their own folding methods, recognizable only to one specific person. It was like a secret handshake between lovers, but in paper form. And more, the number of folds could indicate the level of intimacy. 3 folds, courtesy. 4, a hint of hope. 5, a warning of passion. Historians still debate whether this folding language was universal or restricted to certain clans. Some say each region had its own style. Others suggest they were private codes developed between sender and recipient over the years, like a silent dance. You choose 3 folds, followed by a simple knot, made with a strip of thin paper dyed with tea. A deliberate choice. Too simple, to seem desperate, but elaborate enough to say, "I thought of you," and it doesn't stop there. In some households, folding a letter included leaving visible empty spaces, small windows of absence between the paper's edges. A symbolic way of saying, "There are still things I don't know how to say." These spaces, curiously, were often the most read parts, because sometimes what goes unwritten is more true. You remember the story of a calligraphy master who sent letters with a single unfinished stroke. The letter was folded and sealed like any other, but the stroke never completed a word. It was like a poem cut short. Some believe he did this to keep the love alive. Others think he simply didn't know what to say. Back in the ceramist's room, you look at the small box where you'll place your letter. Made of dark, polished wood, its interior lined with cotton fabric. A worthy container, not luxurious, but respectful, and you slide the letter inside with the same care as one. Uses to close a book they're not quite ready to finish, she notices. Says nothing, but notices then you tie the box with a linen string, a single knot, no bow, because bows can come undone by accident. Knots do not. The practice of knots is ancient. In times of war, samurai used cords to mark alliances. In times of peace, to seal feelings. A well-made knot is a visual promise. It says, this will stay as it is unless someone intentionally undoes it. You run your fingers over the knot and think of all the silent gestures that, over the centuries, replaced words. A folded handkerchief in the kimono hem, a petal placed atop a tea bowl, the way one holds a teacup a little too long just to stay in the room. There is so much in gestures. So much history in silence, and so even if the letter is never read aloud, even if the words are forgotten, the fold, the scent, the box, the knot, all of them have already told their part. You hand over the box without ceremony. You simply leave it on the table like one leaves an umbrella after a visit, and she doesn't ask anything, but her fingers rest upon the wood, as if recognizing something long expected. The letter is delivered, and now time does the rest, like the wind that dries the invisible ink on paper. When the reply came in fans and forgotten handkerchiefs, you walk along the gravel path, hands empty but head full. The letter has been delivered, the box left behind, the knot tied. Now remains the waiting. And waiting, as you well know, was never the strength of a samurai, especially when the battlefield is the heart. But contrary to what your military training might suggest, not every reply arrives in the form of a written letter. Sometimes the answer comes in a gesture, an object, a punctuated silence, because the codes of ancient love were multifaceted and surprisingly creative. You remember the stories from the Gion Temple, where young samurai received replies through fans. Yes, uchiwa, those flat, round fans, often dismissed as simple summer accessories. But to those who knew how to look, they were more eloquent than poetry. A closed fan, left with the bamboo side facing up, could indicate respectful rejection. A partially opened fan, curiosity. And if the fan came with a small poem written in watercolor ink, that was a reply filled with quiet enthusiasm, almost a proposal for continuation. Historians still debate whether these codes varied by city, or if there was something more spontaneous about them. Some believe they were gestures taught in tea houses. Others swear they were romantic improvisations born from nervous hearts. Today, however, it's not a fan you find. It's a handkerchief, folded but not carefully, seemingly forgotten. Left, on the bench where you usually rest your katana, a pale handkerchief with blue-gray embroidered edges. The scent, green tea and something else. Lavender, you pick it up gently, examining the fold. It's not a coincidence. It can't be. The fold has 3 layers, a common pattern among women who wanted to draw attention without being direct. Almost as if to say, I saw your letter, I'm still thinking. The handkerchief has a tiny ink stain in the corner, blue. You imagine, had she tried to write something, did she stop halfway? And that's not all. There's a small stone inside the handkerchief, a smooth pebble like the ones found on the banks of the Sumida River. That truly is a clear sign. Some scholars say women use stones to say, I am steadfast. Others claim it meant, wait a little longer. Still others see it as poetic response. What you sent me still weighs. On me, you close your eyes, a breeze passes. The city outside carries on. Merchants shouting, children running, life continuing as if no letters had been exchanged and no hearts were on the line. But you know, the handkerchief is there, the stone is there. The waiting is no longer silence. It is dialogue in code, and you recall the old anecdote from the calligraphy master who used to say, a reply that comes too fast is usually a lie. The true ones come with time and unexpected folds. You tuck the handkerchief away, not in the box of letters, but in the sleeve of your kimono, close to your body, to feel the touch of the answer in every movement. Nothing is said, but everything has been spoken. You smile softly, knowing that sometimes loving like a samurai is exactly that, reading what was never written. The last letter that was never sent. Time passes. The seasons change, and you learn to live with the absence of certainty, a specialty for those who have lived through battles where not even the next day was guaranteed. You carry on with your duties. The sword must be sharpened, the apprentices trained, but every now and then the eyes betray you. They search for some sign in the garden, some movement behind the paper curtain, as if the letter were about to arrive, even if it never will. And then one night, with no intention or plan, you find yourself writing again. The sheet is new, the calligraphy the same, but now there is something slower in your wrist, something that doesn't want to reach the end of the sentence too soon. You begin with, "If this letter is never sent, that's okay." Yes, it is a letter with no recipient, though you know very well who it would be for. But this time there are no hidden intentions, just the desire to record, to keep, perhaps for yourself, the memory of all that remained in between the words, the perfumes, the stones and the folds. You write about the day the letter was delivered, about the handkerchief left behind, about the silences that, even without sound, screamed of reciprocity. And you remember that inside joke between the two of you, something about how the temple cats seemed to understand etiquette better than the monks themselves. The brush glides with a silent smile. Historians still debate whether this kind of letter, the unsent one, was a common practice or a romantic exception. Some believe they were kept for times of mourning. Others say they served as meditation, a form of ritualized emotional detachment. But you're not concerned with theories now, you just write, and when you finish, you do not fold it. Do not seal it. Do not store it in a box. You simply place the letter between the pages of an old book of poems that no one reads anymore. A simple hiding place, not to be found, but to remain. There's a strange dignity in that choice. The choice not to seek an answer, not to demand a reply, to trust that sometimes silence is the most honest ending. You leave the room with a lighter breath, and as you pass by the veranda, you notice the tea bowl, still warm, left there as if by accident. Next to it a flower, no writing, no folds, but the petal. It's from the same species as the ink used in your last letter. You don't touch it. You simply observe, and in that brief moment you understand. Letters aren't made to deliver answers. They're made to create spaces, where two worlds draw close, even without touching. Where words rest with the paper, the world feels quieter now. Not from a lack of sound, but from an abundance of acceptance. You walk slowly through the hallways of the house. The floorboards creak, as if they too hold memories. And maybe they do. How many letters have passed through here? How many steps taken between hope and waiting? It's past midnight, and the lamplight dances on the walls, casting shadows that resemble floating letters, as if the words from the letters weren't forgotten, only transformed into another form. You sit down. There is nothing left to write, and no regret for what remained between the lines. Because samurai, even though they wielded swords, knew that not every cut is made of steel. Sometimes what separates two souls is only a comma. You open the box of saved letters. You read one or two without haste. Some are too short, others too long, but all share the same invisible thread, a human attempt to touch what cannot, Beheld, the unsent letter still rests inside the book of poems. You chose to leave it there, a small secret between paper and time. Historians still debate whether samurai romanticism was a real practice or a later idealization. Some say the warriors were too rough for subtle feelings. Others claim that was precisely the beauty, hearts carefully hidden inside tightly closed kimonos. You, sitting there, don't care about these disputes. The flower left behind remains untouched, as if time itself respects that gesture more than any military treaty. You close the box, blow out the lamp, and stay there in the dark, just listening. Your heart no longer beats with urgency. It beats like a distant drum, steady, calm. You feel that you are finally at peace with everything that was said and everything left unsaid. The silence now is more than the absence of sound. It's a pause full of meaning, like the end of a letter that doesn't need a signature, like the moment you close your eyes, not to escape, but to remain. Take a deep breath. You've walked the whole path, sat with the past, walked alongside memories, touched feelings that resisted time and hid themselves in folds of paper. All in silence, all with honor. That's the beauty of the letters the samurai kept. They weren't meant to be read aloud. They were meant to survive inside, like seeds, like promises. So now allow yourself to rest too. Let the gentle sounds around you carry you softly. Maybe the imagined rustle of rice paper leaves, or the wind passing through the red gates of a forgotten temple. Everything is calm now. You can release the weight of your watchfulness. You can trust the paper to hold what needs holding. Because just like the letters, you too are made of layers, of quiet intentions, of gestures that speak volumes even when they say nothing at all. The story ends here, or maybe it begins when you awaken. But for now, stay, rest, breathe, and know that everything you wrote in silence still echoes gently, somewhere only dreams can reach. Good night. Sleep well.